What is going on, guys and girls? It is GhostRobo. How are you all doing? Welcome back to another mini podcast, joined once again by the legendary British fellow Game Riot.
Hello.
Are you feeling quite legendary today?
No, you just told me I'm going to die from drinking Diet Coke.
Before we started, we were talking about health and Diet Coke and aspartame and all the bad things that people unintentionally put in their body. But let's turn things to the good side, to the true legendary side, which is the month of March. I thought today we would talk about the great games of March, because I think, frankly, it might be the best month in gaming history.
Well, that's definitely a statement to make, isn't it? Making it the best. For me, I remember this month ages ago now. I think it was 2010, perhaps even further back. I think this Orange Box come out. I think the very first BioShock came out. I remember that being noted as one of the best months ever for gaming, I think.
Yeah, there were some... I want to say there was also one in... around that similar time where, like, Uncharted 2, Assassin's Creed 2, there were some...
Yeah, a couple of years afterwards, I think.
Very, very juicy months, but I think this one will go down quite remarkable. You know, if we start off...
Definitely a noted one.
Yeah, with the list, you've got Dark Souls 2, Titanfall, Metal Gear Solid Ground Zeroes, Infamous Second Son. You also have the BioShock Infinite Burial at Sea DLC. And I'm really desperate to squeeze Plants in there. I know it doesn't quite...
It doesn't count, but it's been a good month anyway. With a lot of games to play, and it's been like non-stop. And I like the fact that we've got such an epic exclusive for the PS4, but I'm wondering when the next one is, but we're obviously going to discuss that another podcast or something, another video. The
future of Xbox One and PS4 exclusives is slightly hazy, but definitely, like... I love that there was so much variety, too. You know, sometimes we get in these months where you have Battlefield and Call of Duty, or you've got open world, but, like, there was such a great variety, and every game seemed to fit, like, a different mood. I don't know if you felt that way, but it was like, I'm in a Titanfall mood, I'm in a Dark Souls mood, I'm in an Infamous mood, and so you could kind of, I don't know, I felt like it was really nice to jump around and have great fun, like, in all these different avenues.
Yeah, you wasn't a big fan of Metal Gear, was you? I mean...
Yeah, we can start there. It just...
Yeah.
I mean...
It was very, very... I'm not sure if you've seen my video, if you guys are watching on GhostRobo channel, but I've done the whole game in literally like under 10 minutes. You can literally rush the game, which sort of put a little bit of hammer. The first time I'd done it was about an hour and a half, and then I managed to rush it in 10 minutes, which was crazy.
I just think it's the biggest tease ever. I mean, Metal Gear is such a big franchise. I thought MGS5 was actually a really cool game. The production values are through the roof. I mean, I still remember that scene where they split the screen. You got Snake fighting here and Vamp and Raiden fighting, Raiden fighting over there. I mean, it's so epic. And then we get this game that's literally 30 or 40 minutes, basically a demo. And I just felt like it really... I mean, they were explicit about what it was, but I still feel like it was such a tease and such a kind of low move, because the typical Walmart customer probably isn't going to know that, hey, this is just a very tiny slice.
Because it was still fairly pricey. I mean, the PS4 version over here was still £25-30. I mean, it wasn't like a cheap game as such either. It wasn't like a cheap download. It felt like it was almost like a prologue, where I think it perhaps would have suited like coming out just before the launch, like perhaps like 2 months before. It'd been like $10 or something.
What I heard people compare it to was, I don't know if you remember Case West, or was it Case Zero? One of those things from Dead Rising 2, where they released it prior. It was like a $5 download, and it had 30 to 60 minutes of content, and nobody complained about that. It was a great way to get people like, hey, I remember this franchise. Hey, I remember the fun that's here, and let's see some of the improvements of the engine, of the controls. That is what this feels like to me. Then it feels like Konami is desperate for cash or something, so they cash in and sell it for $30-40. I don't know. I liked what I played, but it just soured the whole experience for me.
I mean, even like we used to get those magazines, those old magazines. You get like the demo disc. The Metal Gear 2 one was, the demo for that was 30 to 40 minutes. Mm-hmm. That was just the demo on the disc for the PS2.
And if you think about like PC demos or stuff like that, where you get like a multiplayer demo, sometimes I know, before I bought a bunch of games, I would just play the demo over and over again. And to have something like this, I mean, I know there's some side ops, but I don't know. It was a huge letdown. Let's not stay on doom and gloom though. Let's talk about the sort of twin exclusives, Titanfall and Infamous. Both of those, they're so different, but I think equally important in their own way. And I'm curious, just right off the bat, if you have a favorite.
My favorite's probably going to be Infamous. I like Titanfall a lot, but I feel like I can't go back on it now. I just feel like I've sort of hit that wall where I don't need to go back on it anymore.
It's
weird, I know. Because I found like friends and stuff. It's fun. I'm enjoying myself, but I feel like this. It almost feels like it's Call of Duty's got a bit more of a drawback for me. I don't know why that is, but
do you think it's that it's this game specifically, or do you think it's that the first person shooter genre in general is just so stale that it's hard for us to grab on? Because Titanfall really does do a lot of things different. We had nothing but glorious things to say about it when we play it. I still think it's so much fun. Every person I show it to enjoys it, but you're absolutely right that it feels like, if you remember like Modern Warfare 2, Black Ops, when those games hit, they like hit. They were there for months and months and months, and it feels like almost everybody's already like forgotten about Titanfall.
I mean, for me, like as a YouTuber, it's I'm not talking about this, but people don't like watching it either. It's not like a watchable game either. It's very, very odd. But stuff like I was talking to someone the other day, and they were saying it lacks that sort of one-on-one encounter that like Call of Duty does, where you're sort of, it's almost like a sort of duel match that whichever you meet someone in the corridor, and you sort of like a bit of a duel. Where this one's a bit more like the Titans feel a bit, you just sort of run away, or the Titans don't really count for much either. It's a bit.
Do you think that the ability to be successful more easily in Titanfall is actually a detriment? Like for me, Titanfall feels more relaxed. Like I can go in there and play attrition and pick up my 70, 80 points without really having a great round. Like I can, like there's not as much sense of accomplishment when you have a quote great round, because I feel like great rounds happen very frequently. Whereas if you go on like a 10 kill streak in Call of Duty, 20 kill streak, I feel
like a champion,
right? Like a MLG pro.
Yeah.
And I almost wonder, it's so great that you have a game that everybody can enjoy and it's a fun time. But I almost wonder if somehow subconsciously that's like a negative point against Titanfall.
I just feel like I enjoyed my time with it, but I feel like I've almost done with it, and that's not
so
good.
sad.
I mean, I played the PC version, which again looks incredible, and it is slightly more challenging on there. I do find it slightly more difficult, whether it's because people using like the keyboard and they've got faster reactions, but it's definitely more difficult on the PC. Where I go on my Xbox One, I do tend to come first without being too big-headed. I just tend to be like come towards the top of the leaderboard, and it's not really much of a challenge. But I don't know.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying about perhaps the lack of, or to frame it a different way, perhaps the increased amount of options somehow makes it less obsessive. Like Call of Duty seemed to be one of those things where we just play round after round after round. I also think it is hurting a little bit from a lack of modes. I know like Black Ops, I remember playing Gun Game and One in the Chamber like over and over and over again and really enjoying like that variety. I also think that the speed at which the game moves kind of downplays the maps and like memorizing the maps or having favorite places, because you're bouncing around constantly. It's almost like it doesn't matter where you play because you're just sprinting around anyways, going invisible, jumping off walls, getting your Titan. Do you feel like that at all?
That's like, what do you mean, like because you move around so quick? You just
because
it's
really Call of Duty. Like notice. I think people have very favorite maps and they have very favorite spots or like very points that they go, strategies with their friends. Titanfall, you're moving so fast, like it's very hard for me to stick with somebody, or very hard for me to know. Like if I was going to explain to you where I was on a map in Titanfall, I feel like it would be so much harder than if I told you, okay, I'm by the flagpole in whatever map in Call of Duty.
Yeah, say if we done like a dual com or something, we wouldn't be able to like organize ourselves to be like in the same spot at each time and then work together. It's more of like a team deathmatch, but an individual team deathmatch. If that makes any sense. But,
yeah, absolutely. And with the Titans, it's almost a negative to group up. Like if you 2-on-1 in Call of Duty is like you're guaranteed to win, but 2-on-1 in Titanfall, man, being together, you're susceptible to a rocket blast or something that could take out both of you. It's
a pilot coming out of nowhere.
It's interesting because I really was like so excited for a crown jewel of a multiplayer shooter, but you're right that just something. It's a great game. I can't even think of a negative thing, but something's off about it, which is interesting. Now, if we swap to the Sony side of things, Infamous.
I love that game.
It's so much fun, and it doesn't do everything. It doesn't do all that it does perfectly, but I feel like it is one of the most purely enjoyable games in like such a long time.
I'm just so glad that I had the opportunity to turn my PS4 on, because it wasn't on for a while.
Yeah,
and it's such a nice console. I don't want to be like start a console war, but it's such a nice console to use, and it's so quick and fast, and the controller feels nice, and it just felt such like a solid game. I mean, we talked about the graphics before, and the graphics look amazing. The open world and free roam aspect of it is even better. It's just, I find myself trying to just do random stuff in it and just trying to like 100% it, which is not like me at all.
Oh yeah,
in other games.
Same here. It's totally not like me to want to clear things out, but like that moment-to-moment gameplay is just really great, and I think I personally think it's a better showpiece for the PS4 than Titanfall is for the Xbox One. I don't know what sales figures are. I haven't really heard a ton about that yet. But in terms of a system seller, like Infamous looks amazing. It plays super fun, and I think it feels like a very I don't know. I think it's more memorable as something that you can identify with Sony and PlayStation than Titanfall with Xbox. You know, you've got the powers, you've got the very vibrant Seattle environment. It just feels like, hey, this could be a game that becomes synonymous with PlayStation 4, especially early in its life cycle.
Definitely. I'd like to see where they go in the future, whether it's DLC content or a potential sequel with the game. But again, we're not saying the game is perfect by any stretch. I don't think it's perfect, but
no. Stuff
like the story was quite weak. I mean, you've been doing the Evil book through, and I don't like the evil side of the story. No. It's very, very. He's completely like a jerk, to be honest. I don't even. It's just like he's just so like.
I was mentioning in one of my videos that like if evil was the only option, I think I would have liked the game like half as much, because you feel so. It's like everything that you hate about some of those really brash characters. Like some people didn't like Cole from Infamous 1 and 2. Some people didn't like some of the assassins from the Assassin's Creed series. But like he's such a jerk. He's just so unlikable.
Even to Betty, he's just like, leave me alone. And just like puts the phone down. It's just like, what?
Yeah, I think they could have done a little bit more with story. And that's something I want to touch on after we talk about this next game, which is Dark Souls 2. And Dark Souls 2, I mean, that brings up so many emotions. Like every emotion that you could spot on a wheel, like I feel about Dark Souls 2. And it's one that like I was so excited for going in. And I know you were really eager to try out as well. And now that we've played a bunch of it, I think it'd be interesting just to let people know where we're at in terms of the game and also our experience and feelings on the whole adventure.
I mean, I got to a point where I've got to this boss. I can't remember because it's the Sentinel.
Ruined Sentinels, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've done it tried about 4 or 5 times, and I just feel like I just want to like shoot myself when I'm playing it. It's just so frustrating to play sometimes. I think the camera just goes jerky. This particular bit is where you jump down from a platform, and then the camera just goes dodgy for me, and I feel like when you die as well, this game is more like about trial and error. You make mistakes, you want to try again. And I feel like it punishes you for dying, which is, I know, sort of makes a bit of sense, but for me, that game, you die so much, you get punished, it takes away your life. It's like, come on, give me a break. Right. Now, it's now going to be a harder experience for me to do. Right. I've got to try and get my souls back. I just feel like I'm getting, it's like a constant like, but then once I do the boss, it's like such a...
Oh, there's no better feeling.
Yeah, it's like I literally jump out of my chair like, yeah.
Yeah, I feel almost bipolar about the game, because on one hand, I feel like this game is the most brave game of the month. It is the most core gamer game of the month. It's taking the most chances. It's the longest, the meatiest, the most intense. And at other times, I feel like they are relying so much on trial and error, so much on unexpected surprises that it's almost like pointless. Like you're saying, like you basically have to do everything multiple times, not because it's hard, not because it's, well crafted, but just because it's like you can't possibly know what's coming. Imagine if you were playing Infamous and all of a sudden a giant robot appeared in front of you and stomped on you. Like, yay, I died. Who cares? So I'm a lot farther than you right now, and I'm still enjoying my time with it, but it's a really interesting game because I think it does things that no other game this month does, which is it really expects a lot of the player. It's one of the only AAA games, and thank God it's AAA now. I feel like it is. It's selling a bunch and so much. Demon Souls was kind of like this creepy little, weird thing from Japan, and now Dark Souls 2
mechanics and stuff,
right? And it was like, what is this odd game? Nobody knows. And now Dark Souls 2 is like a big mainstream thing, but it expects so much of you, and it doesn't hold your hand. It doesn't tell you anything. You can ruin the entire game for yourself at any point. And I don't know. Does that seem? Do you view that as stupid or brave?
I see it as being brave. I mean, it does come. It's a AAA game which is. I feel like this day and age we're so like the games are so much easier these days. I remember playing back on like the PS2, the PS1 era, particularly for me, where I really got into games a lot. I felt like the games were like so much harder then, and I was dying, and I was coming back and doing checkpoints. Where I feel like now I'm not really dying too much in games.
Yeah,
I mean, Infamous Second Son, for example, I died, I guess a few times because the enemies just flock at you, and it does get a bit overbearing. But compared to like Dark Souls, where it's so properly like hardcore, you have to like do everything over and over and over again. You just got to keep practicing, leveling up, and just it's definitely rewarding, but I feel like sometimes it punishes a little bit too much. It puts the dagger a bit quite hard and twists it a little bit as well. And so you got this really like pain in your chest.
Yeah, it definitely is painful. It's one of the only games that makes me like sweat and scream and yell. And at the same time, though, I feel like that is what defines it as this really great game, because most games these days are like sort of an amusement park ride. You're along for the ride. You're doing the stuff, sure, but it's basically carrying you through the experience. You know, even something like Infamous, like you said, you die a few times, but for the most part, you're going from here to there and doing the missions, and not much is stopping you. It's kind of like, let's enjoy the ride. Dark Souls 2 is very much like you could buy that game, play an hour, and never go farther. Or you could spend ages just wandering in an environment. Like, I feel like very much so you are playing against the game in Dark Souls rather than with the game. Does that make sense? Like, I feel like the enemies are almost like real in that game because they're it's so against you. You know, you have to.
So punishing, isn't it? When you do, I don't know, stuff like when you're doing that boss, you just get flicked into the lava so easily. It's just like, oh man.
You have to really work at it though, and like you could go a different path or here, and I think that to me that's what sets it apart, is that it's very unique. It doesn't rely on many of the tropes that current quote big games rely on. And it's also an interesting comparison. You take something like Titanfall, people kind of were questioning, is this worth $60 being multiplayer only, no real campaign, the campaign that's there is pretty crappy. Dark Souls 2, like, I've put hours upon hours, 40 plus episodes into that game, and I'm not even at the halfway point. And
that's a bit, almost sounds a bit too long, because I think this sort of game should be a long experience, but not like drawn out, if that makes any sense. It feels like it's starting to become a little bit. When you said you're only halfway, I was like, wow, I feel sorry for you a little bit.
The only thing that the credit I give it is like, it's not putting you on fetch quest. It's all new environments, and you know what I mean? So there definitely is a balance of like, oh my God, I'm done with this game. So I don't know. Like I said, I go back and forth being like, this is the best game of all time. And like, this is just a tiresome exercise in frustration and repetition.
Get past that bit, isn't it? The frustrating bit. If you get past that bit, I feel like it starts rewarding you again, and then again you get to a boss, and it's like,
it really is like almost like a funnel. Like, it opens up when you're doing well, and then you funnel it down to this point that you have to repeat over and over and over, and you get stuck. But as soon as you like break that little tight spot, boom, it opens back up, and you've got like an hour or two of like, wow, I'm just rolling right along. This feels really good, and then you hit those moments again. But I mean, I'm right now in an area where I'm randomly getting cursed as I walk around. I don't even know why. There's crazy enemies everywhere. I love it. I love it so much. And I think that it should be applauded for how different it is. And I wish that more games don't have to be like Dark Souls, don't have to be as hard, but I wish that they would take more chances like that. Even something like Skyrim, Fallout. I hope that those games will be a little more bold in their direction instead of just doing the same very guided experience,
I mean, if you like, I sound like you wasn't as frustrated with the first game though. It feels like you perhaps enjoyed Dark Souls, like Dark Souls 1. Perhaps a little bit more. Was it a little bit less, sort of, not cheap? Cheap's not the right word, but I mean, it's like, I don't know. It feels like perhaps Dark Souls 1 was a little bit more lenient in some ways.
Yeah, people have talked about the difficulty if 1 or 2 are harder. Or if it's like, oh, you've played 1. I do feel like it suffers a little bit from fatigue in the sense that determination doesn't last forever. So like in Dark Souls 1, like you get killed, you want to go get your souls, you lose them. No, it's terrifying. And then like you have more of a drive because it's the first time you've done it and you want to prove that you can conquer this game. Now doing that a second time, even though I feel like it's a tighter game, a better game, there isn't as much motivation. Does that make sense? Like it's not like a crowning glory of
and because I've done it before, sort of thing.
Right, because I've done a lot of it before. I mean, it's like the first time you played a multiplayer shooter and the first time you got like that epic kill streak and got some, crazy thing. You know, it would feel really monumental. But then if you've gotten 50 kill streaks, it's like, oh, I did good and I'm proud of it and I'm happy. But I feel like that your first moment with Dark Souls can't really be replicated. I don't know. It's really interesting, and it kind of leads us into our favorite game of the month. And I do have to say, though, that none of these games grabbed me like 100%. Like, they were all very, very fun, but like, I think about my time playing The Last of Us or even BioShock Infinite, where like I was so desperate to play more of that game, I didn't want to do anything else. And all these games were fun, but I mean, do you know what I'm saying? Like, none of them, I don't know if it's, do you think it's because they lacked story? Like, none of them really had a great story. Do you think that's the...
I think me and you both like a really good story and like solid gameplay, where perhaps these games had one of those and perhaps not the other one, where Dark Souls is obviously purely gameplay focused and Infamous is almost, I say, free roaming gameplay focused, and obviously Titanfall is multiplayer, so Metal Gear has like literally no story in it at all, really. Let's not talk about that.
Well, there's the creepy cutscene at the end with the girl exploding and whatever else.
That was weird.
Like, so gross.
Anyway, yeah. I have a second bomb in me.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that. Like, when I first played that section, I didn't think anything of it. But then when I rewatched it, I was like, I cannot believe they did that. Like, what? It's just so gross and like creepy, and like they put a second bomb in my, and then she doesn't say it and she blows up, and it's just like, really?
Are they referencing where I think she's referencing?
Yes. That's what I'm. I think that's the impression everybody else is taking, which is just like, really, like.
Don't say it in the comments.
Really?
No.
Really? But yeah, I think that characters and stories like endear us to games so much, so incredibly much. And we mentioned this in sort of our last mini podcast about open world games are great because they're a lot of fun, but we don't want next gen to be entirely about creating the biggest world. Those focused experiences, I think they stick with you more. And nothing against these games at all, but just, I don't know. They just didn't. I was looking for one of them to be like, you know, bow before me. I am the great game that you will play for hours upon end. And they were all missing that special ingredient, I think.
Yeah, where Last of Us was. I mean, even the DLC, for example. When was the DLC? Was that
Left
February,
Behind?
Yeah, was that February?
So
it wasn't March, was it?
Goodness gracious! I think it was February. I'll look it up real quick. Left Behind.
But yeah, generally, The Last of Us just stuck in my head. I was constantly thinking about the ending of it and the story in it. Joel as a character, Ellie as a character was just so. I can't even compare them to like another story game where I can't think of one.
Yeah,
in recent history.
We're almost like so jaded now by The Last of Us. Like, I feel like we talk about it all the time. Like, was that as good as The Last of Us? Was that as good as The Last of Us?
We can't compare Dark Souls to The Last of Us. We're just saying I think we both like. In our opinions, I think we both like the story.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I was just saying none of the games hooked me as much, and I don't know. I guess I have a very fantastical mind, so I like get really wrapped up in world. I'm like, I want to know Joel and Ellie. I want to be their friend, and I want to.
Well, perhaps not Joel's friend.
It came out.
They just kill us.
It came out February 14th, Valentine's Day, so it was a February game. But honestly, like, I was more intrigued to finish Left Behind faster than I was any of these games. I think it's the story factor. Nonetheless, though, we got to pick a favorite. So, favorite game of March. You got Dark Souls, you got Metal Gear, Infamous, Titanfall. Where do you fall?
For me, it's got to be Infamous. That's the game I sunk probably the most time into. The game I enjoyed so much. I couldn't get myself off that game. I had a day off one day, and I was just like, I have to play this game. I just addicted to it. The graphics were amazing. Gameplay was addicting as well, and the movement was amazing as well. I just love that game to bits, and I want to see more content from that game. So definitely Infamous for me.
Yeah, and not website content. The paper trail stuff is like.
Don't get me started on that. I spent about an hour doing a 15-minute video on that.
It's like a really cool concept. What they do is you have to go on the website, solve some puzzles, then go back in the game and do some stuff. But the speed of it should
be all within the game, in my opinion.
It should be all in the game, or I sit there for 10 minutes connecting, and then it says, oh, you can't connect. It's like, just give me the freaking mission. But I am hopeful, as you are, that they'll do like a new power for DLC or
it's like 6 parts late. I've done one part and it took me like an hour.
Absolutely crazy. For myself, I don't know. I feel ashamed that neither of us are going to say Titanfall. I feel bad because that game is incredible, but
we're not saying it's bad. There's so many good games this month that we're picking our first one. Not
I mean, honestly, I think I might say Plants vs Zombies if that came out in March. As crazy as that sounds, I love that game. I think it's absolutely...
That's definitely a February game.
Absolutely.
Well, saying that Last of Us came out, so perhaps that's mine. I don't know.
Absolutely brilliant. Just such a unique design. For me, it's down to Dark Souls 2 and Infamous, and just to talk myself through this, Infamous surprised me. I enjoyed it more than I thought. I thought it was very fun moment to moment, and just the whole experience, story, presentation, graphics, I thought everything just was really solid. But Dark Souls 2, I feel, is still a more risky and important game in the grand scheme of things, just because it's doing stuff and relying on very few of the typical trends that games follow, and that makes me want to give it to Dark Souls, even though I'm probably having more fun with Infamous.
Who'd you pick?
It's a tough one. Can I give him a tie, or is that not fair?
That's not fair. You need to pick one.
Oh gosh. I mean, on one hand, you can think what game is more fun currently versus like what game would you look back upon in a few years and say. I mean, do you think in a few years Infamous will still be one of your favorites?
I think it'll be up there.
Yeah.
Well, it depends on how much PS4 games are going to get on Xbox One games. I don't know. Going to see how it rolls out, because this year looks a bit empty. I was going to say at the end, what one would this game of the month be your game of the year potentially?
Oh yeah, that's an interesting thing as well. My gosh, I can't decide.
Infamous.
I'm trying to think of like which one would I rather. Like, which one would I, if I could only play one, which one would I guess then from that standpoint, it's probably Infamous. I don't know. I'm still not done with Dark Souls, so TBA on Dark Souls, TBD, I guess, on that. But right now I will say Infamous just because it's a complete package and I really enjoyed it every moment, which is great for Sony. Like, kudos to them on having a next-gen game that really delivered. I mean, right? Like, that's a huge deal early on, and it's a decent ways into the console cycle. I think we can both safely say that the PlayStation 4 is the more usable console.
Definitely.
Not saying it's the best or the games are so great, but
exactly. But we're just saying I'm saying I just find the PS4 console. If I was to pick one now, after playing both, I'd definitely pick the PS4 over it, just because its usability is so much better. And
I think now Infamous gives us a game to pin that to, right? Before we could say, oh, the PS4 is more usable, but games like whatever. I think Infamous is a must-play experience, and especially from a visual standpoint, you can't experience that anywhere else. So, all right, I'll give it to Infamous. I feel really bad about Dark Souls 2. Maybe I'll rescind and have a recount later on in the year.
I mean, one thing I do want to see is like Dark Souls next gen. If they really just plummet money into that game, just loads of it.
That's a difference too, because think about that comparison. If Dark Souls looked like Infamous, that could be a real interesting thing.
So gorgeous and frustrating at the same time.
Yeah, frustratingly beautiful. Like most of the. Oh, never mind. Anyways, you guys, we'll let you guess where that's going. And also, let us know in the comments below your favorite game of March. Was it Infamous, Dark Souls, Metal Gear, even something like Bioshock Burial at Sea, which we didn't touch on? Let us know your favorite game in the comments below. Also, let us know what you think of these mini podcasts. If you like these extended discussions, you want to see more of them, what you'd like us to talk about in the future, and I think we'll bring them to you. Don't be shy. Go check out Game Riot's channel. Link in the description below. He puts out tons of awesome content on the daily. Thanks for being here, man.
No problem. I enjoyed it.
Great discussion as always. Infamous is crowned the game of March, and March is crowned one of the best games, one of the best months for games of all time. Guys and girls, thank you for joining. A fantastic day. Drink some hot chocolate. Until next time, we will see you all later.